up, guys? I'm Zach Joachim. This is On the Horn. I'm dropping some confetti on you from Capital One Arena today from the post-game celebrations after VCU won the Atlantic 10 Tournament Championship 68-63 against George Mason in what was a pretty wild game in an amazing electric atmosphere that we'll get to in a second. But I will start by saying I'm sorry it took me so long to do this today. I would have loved to and should have tried to film On the Horn like during the post-game celebrations on the court afterward, but I was trying to capture everyone, cutting down the nets, Coach Odom and all his assistants and the players climbing the ladder and everything. Had interviews with Brandon Jennings, with Max Shulga, with Jack Clark, and with Zeb Jackson afterward. And I was also trying to get a story up online immediately after the game. And then we went to the post-game presser, and then I wrote my story for print the next day and hammered that out, and then ran over to the team hotel for the watch party where VCU learned that they will be a number 11 seed in the NCAA tournament and play number 6 BYU on Thursday in Denver. And then ran to a McDonald's on the outskirts of DC to write that story because I already checked out of my hotel, and then had a bunch of logistical planning and stuff after that, looking ahead to this week and doing my credential application for the NCAA tournament. So I'm sorry it took me so long to get to this. This is On the Horn, and I'm Zach Joachim. It's not On the Horn at all. It's actually 2:30 a.m. in Richmond right now, but I drove back to Richmond and got back around midnight and then did Rams Rewind with my dear friend George Templeton, and then the 3-Bid League pod with my dear friend Tyler Cronin. So it's been an incredibly long day. I would also add that I made the mistake of going out in DC on Saturday night with a bunch of A10 friends, which was awesome. Shout out to Matt Shelton-Ide and Hunter and Tyler and Tristan Freeman and everyone who was part of that group. That was very fun, but I paid for it a little bit today. So was struggling a little bit. I think I rolled into the arena at like 12:30 before the game and definitely should have given myself some more time there. So I'm sorry it took me so long. Most of you probably won't see this until tomorrow, but let's talk about VCU George Mason, because there were 12,516 people at this game. That is the second highest attendance ever for an Atlantic 10 tournament final. It was an absolutely electric atmosphere. It was one of my favorite college basketball games that I've ever covered, maybe my favorite. Fan base is going back and forth. It was 60-40 to 70-30 VCU fans. It was a little tough to tell with a lot of the gold in the shirts. The crowds kind of bled into each other a little bit. There were certainly more VCU fans there, but two fan bases that know one another well, that had some wonderful battles back in the CAA days when VCU and George Mason were conference foes. Mason had never been to an A10 semifinal, much less an A10 final before this year. So this was a long time coming, a chance for VCU and Mason, two regional rivals. I have friends that went to George Mason. Plenty of people that went to George Mason that I know have plenty of friends that went to VCU. Fairfax and Richmond aren't that far from each other. If you know the college complexion in the state of Virginia, you know that those two schools know each other well. I asked Patriots coach Tony Skinn the other day after they won their semifinal against St. Joseph's if it recalled some CAA memories for him. He's obviously a former Mason player, and he said 1,000%. Felt like these two teams were on a collision course this year. They only played at Siegel Center. VCU did not go to Eagle Bank this year. They shared the A10 regular season title. That game should happen twice every year. So it was a wonderful callback to two programs that know one another well. And it was a great game, probably the best game I've ever seen in which one team involved never led, right? VCU led for 37-03 in this game. Mason was never ahead, but they were never out of it either. They kept clawing back, cut it down to one really late at, 59-58, I think, with 2:25 to go. But let's start at the beginning. Philip Russell got VCU off to a great start, scored the first 6 points of the game. Rams had an early lead, and they were ahead pretty much the whole way past that. But again, Mason was right there. Late in the first half, when did VCU really start to lengthen this out? I think, so let's start with the scuffle. There was Philip Russell was called for a flagrant, which I thought was the right call. After looking at it again, it looked like he was trying to box out and maybe ended up kind of throwing a shoulder into a Mason player there. So I thought that was the right call on the flagrant, but I will say that it was the same thing that happened to Phil the day before, I thought, in the Loyola game, and it was only called a common foul. I believe those both should have been flagrants. And so Phil only ended up playing 14-39, scored the first 6 points of this game, and then didn't score again. It was an incredibly emotional game easy for emotions to spill over. There was a chippy sequence. Let's look at that for a second here, in which Jalen Haynes and Christian Furman received double technicals. Max Shulga fell to the floor. This is about 4 minutes to go in the second half, and it was a jump ball. Haynes tried to rip it away from him. Jalen Haynes is obviously a massive guy, the George Mason big, who led them with 17 points today, but was 5 of 14 from the field. VCU did a great job crowding him, making him uncomfortable. The post defense from Christian Furman and Luke Bamboye was outstanding. VCU 9 blocks in this game. Their rim protection has been nationally elite all year. Bamboye had 4 of those. I believe he's 7th all time now for blocks in a single season in VCU program history, with 74 on the year, which is just bonkers for a freshman. Jack Clark also 3 blocks. We'll get to Jack in a little bit. Jack did a little bit of everything today. He was outstanding, was the tournament's most outstanding player, well-deserved, was good in all 3 games. He scored 17 points, had 6 rebounds, a couple steals, the 3 blocks, 15 over on the plus minus when he played 34-51, and this is a 5-point game at the end, so that's a wild number. But let's jump back into the end of that first half. Clark hits a catch and shoot 3 with 2 minutes to go to make it 33-28. And VCU ends up with their largest lead going into halftime after a Max Shulga rebounds and putback. I think Luke Bamboye may have tipped that a little bit in the direction of Shulga, so a big credit to Luke. I don't think he got credit for a rebound, but I think he got a hand to it and kind of redirected it to Shulga, who put back off glass in one fluid motion and gave VCU a 36-28 lead headed into halftime, which was huge. And I don't know if it necessarily felt like they deserved to be up 8 at that point, because Mason was hanging in there. And then you get to the second half, and Mason just kept battling back, right, and making this a close game. Every time that VCU would get it close to or at double digits and threaten to really take control, Mason would fight back and cut it back down to 1, 2, or 3. And then every time Mason got right there, and it seemed like they were going to either tie it or take the lead or wrestle control from VCU, then VCU responded with a run to lengthen out the lead again. One sequence I want to highlight, about 15 minutes to go, second half, Joe Bamisile back-to-back and ones. That was massive. First one, he curled off a screen at the top of the key, took a handoff, got downhill, finished off glass plus the foul. That made it 41-36 and then hit the free throw for 42-36 with 15:15 to go. And then on the very next possession, runner in the lane through contact, his second consecutive and one. He hit the free throw again, 45-36. That was the largest lead for VCU with 14:34 to go. That was another moment that it felt like they might really run away with things. And then Mason fights back. After a couple buckets, there's a Jared Billups catch and shoot 3 on the right wing for 45-40 with 13 minutes to go. Woody Newton stepped into a 3 on the left wing for 45-43 with 12:15 to go. Timeout Odom, all of a sudden it's a 2-point game, right? And then VCU responds again. A Max Shulga tray on the left wing, 48-43. Felt like they could take control there. And then Jack Clark, 3 at the top of the key off of Max Shulga assist. Shulga backed his man down, drew some help, passed out of the post, and Clark hit a wide open 3 for 53-43. Rams' largest lead with 9:06 to go. Another one of those moments where it's like, okay, is VCU really going to run away with this and take control here? Mason responds again, right? With 5:13 to go, it's 53-50 after Zach Anderson hit a couple of free throws. And then Shulga got to the line for 2 to make it 55-50. And here's the really vital sequence. Darius Maddox 3 on the left wing, between the left wing and the top of the key for 59-58 with 2:25 to go. And then Tony Skinn called a timeout. And then VCU responded. The crowd was going wild. The Mason fans were really into it. And then the shot of the game, I thought, a Max Shulga 3 up off the dribble at the top of the key with under 2 minutes to go for 62-58. A Luke Bamboye slam on a board and bucket followed not long after that for 64-60. And then VCU was able to hold on in the last couple of minutes, although we had double celebrations, because in one moment, VCU thought the game was over after an Anderson 3 that would have tied the game at 66 went in and out. George Templeton talked about that all weekend, that those rims were unforgiving. We had so many threes go in and out this weekend, and VCU did not shoot it well from 3 over the course of the few games, but it helped them in that moment, because Anderson's 3 that could have tied the game was halfway down. Rams get the rebound. The horn sounds. You think the game's over. They start celebrating. Refs put 0.5 back on the clock, and huge credit to Joe Bamisile, who stepped to the line and hit 2 free throws after that for 68-63 in the final margin, because 0.5 may be enough for Mason to get a shot off there if Joe doesn't hit the free throws, and that's so hard to refocus if you're Joe, right, in that moment after you've already been celebrating and thought the game was over, and then you got to step to the line and hit a couple, and he did. Clutch stuff from him. He was great all day driving the lane. He finished with 17 points, 6 of 10 from the floor, really put the ball on the deck and got to the cup consistently. Shulga, a game-high 18 points, 3 assists, 4 rebounds for him, a steal, just continues to do a little bit of everything for this team. 8 of 9 at the free throw line, too. And as I said, Clark, 17 points, 6 of 7 at the line, 3 of 5 from 3. We've talked about it ad nauseum, but I don't think we can give him enough credit for how he responded from the cold shooting to begin the season. If Jack Clark doesn't start hitting from outside down the stretch like he did for this team in conference play, then VCU is not the A-10 regular season or tournament champions right now. He's been absolutely vital to this team. Maybe got snubbed with the all-conference honors at the end of the year, but I hope the most outstanding player award that was so deserved made up for it in Jack's eyes. Looking at the stat sheet here, Mason outshot VCU from outside, which is fascinating, right? For a Mason team that wants to pound the ball on the interior and be physical and get to the cup. They were 9 of 21 from 3. That's 42.9%. VCU 8 of 25. That's 32%. If you told me those percentages before the game, that was going to be the disparity from 3, I'd say Mason probably wins, right? But VCU ended up 19 of 47 from the floor for 40%. Mason 19 of 56 for 33.9%. So what's the math on that? Mason only made 10 2-point field goals, right? VCU made, how many is that? 11, I guess. And the free throw line helped a lot too. VCU 22 of 27 at the line. Mason 16 of 19. This was a really physical game. I think VCU dared Mason to beat it from outside, right? They were collapsing aggressively on Haynes. They were not going to give up any easy twos. And although Haynes still ended up with the 17 points, he was 5 of 14 from the floor. It was a really difficult 17 points. Anderson and O'Connor hit some big threes for Mason. And as I said, Maddox hit a couple as well. But I think the Rams dared Mason to beat them from outside and kind of go outside their comfort zone, go against the grain of how they want to play offense. And it ended up working out. Rams led for 37-03 by as much as 10 at that 53-43 mark with 9:08 to go. But ended up fending off George Mason. A huge tip of the cap to the Patriots, who competed their asses off today, and to the Mason fans. Again, it was an outstanding atmosphere in Capital One Arena. And VCU's dancing, right? It removed the all of the speculation and conversations that we've had about their at-large hopes. I've seen competing things online about with how the field shook out. Would VCU have been out? If they'd been in, they were going to be like the last team in if they'd lost today. So instead of having to sweat it out, though, they assured themselves that they were in. It was awesome to be at the watch party. I wrote about Christian Furman walking up the steps after their names were called. Had the biggest smile on his face, man. I love that dude's personality. It's gravitational. And Firm smiles big a lot. I think that was the biggest one I've ever seen on his face. And to be there with a huge thank you to VCU for allowing me that access and what's an intimate setting, right, with friends and family and loved ones there. Celebrating a goal that they've been working to all year. VCU will play number 6 BYU, which is a fascinating matchup. It's a callback to last year, right, when Duquesne was an 11 seed and BYU was a 6, and the Dukes took down BYU in the first round. So could have shades of that this year. The stylistic contrast is fascinating. I'll write an article tomorrow previewing that game, but we'll get into it a little bit here. VCU is number 30 nationally in Ken Palm adjusted efficiency. BYU number 24. So there's not a very big gulf there. I think this is a good matchup for VCU, and they've got every chance to pull off this upset in advance. The game's in Denver. It's at 4:05 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday, 2:05 p.m. Time in Denver, Mountain Time, right? And let's look at the metrics because it's one of the best defenses in the country in VCU against one of the best offenses in the country in BYU. I didn't realize this until today. VCU leads the country in effective field goal percentage at 44.4%. And they're fourth in 2-point percentage defense at 43.6%, 23rd in 3-point percentage defense at 30.6%. Their contests are outstanding. And as we've talked about, they are elite shot blocking, 15.6% block percentage defensively. That's 7th nationally. Bamboye and Furman lead that charge. Jack was huge today. And VCU's guards get involved in that regard too, right? They use their length to contest shots. VCU does not give you any easy looks. And when BYU has the ball, it's going to be strength against strength because Cougars are 7th nationally at 57.2 effective field goal percentage, 6th in 2-point percentage at 58.6. and 33rd in three-point percentage at 37.1. Going to be a fascinating game. VCU is flying up to Denver on Tuesday. They'll have an open practice on Wednesday. So I think I'm going to fly up either Wednesday morning or maybe Tuesday night, depending on what time that open practice is, to go to it and cover that. And I'll write about it as much as I can this week. Thank you all so much for following the coverage this weekend. Again, I had VCU fans walk up to me at Capital One Arena, some of whom I knew, some of whom I'd never met before, and to tell me that they follow the coverage and they read the stories and they watch on the Horn. And that means more than I can say, guys. Love you all. Thank you so much for the kind words, for following the coverage. VCU 68, George Mason 63. In a season that had very high expectations for VCU, picked to win the conference. I wrote about them having one of the best backcourts in the country before the season. I think that's all come to fruition. They lived up to the hype, and they're Atlantic 10 tournament champions, and they're dancing for the first time since 2023. Ryan Odom mentioned it at the post-game press conference. No VCU team. VCU hasn't missed the NCAA tournament in back-to-back years since 2004. I did not realize that, and they talked about it all year, the fact that they didn't want to be that team to break that run. This was their goal all year. They accomplished it, and I think the consensus is very much that they got a chance to make noise in the NCAA tournament and take down BYU and maybe go on a run here. Wisconsin and Montana is the 3-14 in that corner of the bracket too. I grew up supporting and watching Wisconsin basketball because my dad is from Baraboo, Wisconsin, and I've been to Madison for a football practice at Camp Randall Stadium. So if VCU and Wisconsin were to meet in the second round, that would be a dream come true for me to be able to cover that game. I'll fly out to Denver in the next few days. Again, thank you all so much for following along the coverage. This is On the Horn. I'm Zach Joachim. Rams to the big dance. They're conference champions. Y'all rock. I'll see you in Denver.